everyone, it's Margaret Manning here. Welcome to 60 and Me. This is the place where women over 60 come to be inspired. My guest today is Jane Archer. Jane is an award-winning cruise journalist, and she loves cruising, like many of us do. And Jane, I'm so happy that we've got you here today. Jane writes for the Daily Telegraph, and she spends half of her life on cruise ships all around the world. So welcome, Jane.
Thank you very much.
I really am glad you're here because we have so many women who love to cruise, including myself, and know very little about some of the wonderful options that we have.
Good. Well, let's hope I can enlighten you a little bit.
Yeah, well, a lot of people, and I actually just taken my first river cruise last year with Viking, are really interested in river cruising. I loved it. I've done both, but I really did love river cruising, and I would love you to tell us, in your opinion, what are some of the advantages of river cruising over ocean cruising?
Well, there's lots, to be honest. The obvious one, I guess, is that if you're on a river cruise, you have a view the whole time. So even if you are sailing, you are going to see the land on both sides. So you've always got a view. In the way they organise the itineraries, they do try to ensure there is a bit of sailing time there. So on a lovely sunny day, if you can imagine, lovely sunny day, you can go up onto the sun deck, glass of wine in your hand, and just sit and watch the world go by. It's absolutely fantastic. The other thing, of course, about a river cruise is that it takes you right to the very heart of some of the most magnificent cities in the world, just amazing, amazing places that you can go to. Yeah. And they were all built up on the rivers because, of course, in the old days, that was the means of transport. You didn't have cars, you didn't have roads, everyone travelled by river. So you built these fantastic cities beside the river so that if somebody was sailing along, they'd happen to notice it and realise, supposing you were the prince, they'd realise how rich you were, how important you were.
How big your castle was.
Absolutely. If you were the bishop, look how fantastic your cathedral or your church is and so on. So that's why these magnificent places grew up alongside the riverbanks. And of course, you get all of the other benefits that you get with cruising. You get on board, you unpack, that's it, you're off. So it's touring, but touring in a very, very easy way because you're not constantly having to unpack and pack and unpack and repack, and everything is there for you. You've got all your meals laid out for you. And then the obvious one at the end of it is you don't have to worry about seasickness. Yeah. Awful subject to bring up, I know, but some people do worry about that, and they worry about going on an ocean cruise because they fear that they may get mal de mer. So go on a river cruise. No problems at all.
I know what you mean about I was sitting up on the sunroof having a glass of wine in your hand. And as you say, it's like going on glass. I mean, it is so smooth. You might as well just be sitting in your living room. You can hold the glass of wine on your hand and it wouldn't spill. I mean, it's just
absolutely
beautiful experience.
So quite just gliding along and watching the views on either side. It is superb, just wonderful.
And surprisingly, or not surprisingly, there's a lot of rivers in this crazy world of ours, and they're not just in Europe, they're all over the place. So I would love you to tell us, because I know you've been on many cruises on the river yourself, some of the highlights, some of the ones you might recommend in Asia and also in Europe.
Okay, well, yes, interestingly, there are so many rivers that people have not even heard of. And that's what I've discovered since I've been doing more and more on river cruising. Yeah. It's amazing how many places there are with rivers. Okay, we've all heard of the Rhine, we've all heard of the Danube, and they are fantastic in their own right. But, if you've done those, what else is there? So I'm going to stick with Europe, first of all. Okay. The Douro is one of the big ones at the moment. The Douro is in northern Portugal, and the cruise really is in Portugal. You start off in Porto, you sail along the Douro as far as the border with Spain, and then there's a day trip to Salamanca, which is in Spain. Then you come back and you back onto your ship and sail back to Porto. So it is an out and a back. That's the way you do it, out and back. But along the way, you're seeing some of the beautiful countryside. I mean, this is wine growing area. This is port wine area. So you've got all of the vineyards on these impossibly steep slopes. It's just amazing to see them, just wonderful. Porto at one end and Salamanca at the other are absolutely fantastic. Salamanca is Spain before the Brits got there, and it is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Porto is also lovely, but in a completely different way. I mean, it's this faded elegance I just love it, and it's built on hills, so you've got all of these hills up and down that you go on. Absolutely worth going to see. Wow, and as I say, the bit in the meantime, plenty of opportunities to taste the port wine, and you go to the little villages, and it is just a fantastic experience. And of course, if you go in the summer, I think I was there last August. I mean, the weather is just absolutely glorious as well. Fantastic.
I've never thought of the Douro in Portugal. That's any particular cruise line that you would recommend?
Well, several of the cruise lines do it, to be honest. Viking has cruises there. You mentioned Viking that you've been with. Amma Waterways goes there. Uniworld River Cruises are there. Emerald Waterways are starting up there this year. They're going to have their first cruises. A company called Quasi Europe, which is a French company. They're launching one of their new ships this year, but that will give them about 4 ships on the Douro. So it's amazingly popular right now. Really, really popular place to go.
That sounds wonderful. I'm really glad you mentioned that one. What about, you talked about the Rhine and the Danube, the Eastern Europe things. What about in France? Is there anything in France?
I was going to say France was going to be the next one. Okay. The Rhone is the big one at the moment. Everybody seems to be going to the Rhone. The Seine is also a fantastic river cruise, but again, it's an out and back from Paris, and with that, obviously, you've got Paris at one end, and you've really got to have at least a night in Paris to enjoy Paris, either at the start or the end. It doesn't matter which one you do, and then you go right up, and at the other end, you've got Rouen. Which is where Joan of Arc was burnt at the stake. You've got the interest there, and then you've got the landing beaches, the Normandy landing beaches that you can go visit. Wow. So you've got a whole host of different places and things that you can go and see. Auvergne-sur-Oise, which I'm not entirely sure I pronounced correctly, was where Vincent van Gogh lived for a very short time and then died, and you can learn all about his life there. I did a fantastic excursion last year there with a guide, knew everything that there was to know about Vincent van Gogh, and just amazing to listen to her. Yeah. So that's brilliant. And then, as I say, going on to the Rhone is particularly popular at the moment. That's basically taking you from Lyon down to the Mediterranean, down to Avignon. And again, you've got Arles. So if you're into painting, Arles is also where Vincent van Gogh used to do a lot of his painting. Avignon, the Palais des Popes, a fantastic place where the popes used to live. Lyon itself, it's known as the gastronomic capital of France. So if you like food, it's fantastic. And then you're coming down through wine country. So you go to Châteauneuf-du-Pape, and you've got plenty of wine tasting that you can do en route. And then still in France, you can do a cruise from Bordeaux. And again, you're very much in the wine regions. Absolutely fantastic. It's actually the cruise itself is not a very long cruise, and it's a combination of 3 rivers. So you're combining the Garonne, the Gironde, and the Dordogne rivers. But going, as I say, to all of these fantastic wine-growing regions, and Bordeaux itself. Bordeaux is just the most amazing city, and you will also have at least one day there to enjoy that. It's fantastic. So 3 cruises in one, and if you really, really want to go the whole hog, you can put all 3 of them together, which is fantastic.
Just spend a month in Europe.
Just do that. So some of them just do 2 of them together. So you would do the Rhone and the Seine, come off the Rhone and go to the Seine, or vice versa. And then you can also patch all 3 of them together. So fantastic French experience.
That is amazing. You know, what you've described, I mean, we mentioned at the very beginning, though, is that the rivers are the heart and soul of these countries. So because for transport and economy. So the beautiful cities that were built along them were so historical, and they fed off the movement of the river. So if you've got any interest in history or art or, like you said, painting or textiles, this is where it all happened, on the river.
Absolutely. As I say, the cities were built absolutely beautiful, stunning, in order to catch the attention, of people coming by. That's why they are so beautiful. I mean, I've said, everyone heard of the Danube. We've not spoken about the Danube, but cruising into Budapest past the Parliament building
Yeah,
is just absolutely stunning. The city is just glorious. And it's not the only one. You're going past these fantastic places. Vienna, again on the Danube. I think Vienna is possibly one of my most favourite cities in the world. It is absolutely glorious.
You know, you've mentioned so many places that I've been on a train, you know, and I know that approach is nice too, because you're right in the middle of the city, but I think approaching it on the water, the Viking cruise that I did was on the Rhine. And I mean, I had so many, like you, so many memories, but the one I loved was going down that point where there's castles on both sides of the river. And the gorge, and you stand on the deck, and they have a loudspeaker telling you the history of the castles, and you know they've changed hands 3 or 4 times in the hundreds of years they've been there, and you just felt like, I don't know, somehow it was important that it wasn't just a frivolous trip, which is part of, I think, travel after 60, that you want it to be something you learn, you absorb something about the place. It's not just frivolous and fun. It's a learning experience as well.
Oh, very much. Oh, absolutely. There is so much history and culture going on in these places. Yes, I mean you just come away with so much information and so much knowledge. It is fantastic, absolutely incredible. I just love it. I really do.
All right, so I've got a list now. I want to go on all 5 of those. I want to go to Portugal and do the Porto one, because I've never been to Porto, but I've heard, like you said, it's an elegant, beautiful city.
It is lovely. It is absolutely lovely. But put your walking shoes on, because up and down those hills is
really
pretty tough.
Is it hilly? Actually, I think Porto might be on 7 hills. There's a bunch of cities in the world that I have this passion to visit because they're built on 7 hills.
They're on 7 hills, yes. Well, Rome obviously is your starting point, unless you've been there.
There's lots of them. I think Rio and Moscow and Seattle, and
I think
there's
Bergen
tons of
claims 7 hills as well. I have a feeling, yes.
There's a lot of them,
but there's not a lot of those around Bergen.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I'm really excited about these. Now, these are ones I think that women over 60 would love. I mean, as you said, river cruising itself, just as an event, has got lots of things going for it. But what in Asia you were going to cover a bit too, because I know there's a lot there. So what's
there is indeed Asia. Yeah. Asia is fantastic. I mean, that is really coming of age now in terms of river cruising. Everyone probably knows of the Yangtze in China, and that kind of ruled the roost for quite some time. But it's been knocked off that top spot, and they probably won't like me for saying that. But it has by the Mekong, which the lower Mekong, which is taking you through Cambodia and Vietnam. Yeah. So you're sailing from Siem Reap into Ho Chi Minh City. Obviously, in Siem Reap, you've got Angkor Wat. Fantastic. Everybody will have heard of Angkor Wat and the temples there. Yes. Just amazing. And then you're sailing into Ho Chi Minh City, which is the most wonderful place. You know, it is lively, it's vibrant, and of course, it's got the history and the culture as well. Extraordinary place. And the newest one, I guess, or one of the newest ones on the scene is you've got the Irrawaddy, which is not a new river, of course, by any means, but because Myanmar has now opened up to tourists, that's become a hugely popular one. And you can do either from Yangon right up to Mandalay, you can do from Yangon up to Bagan, you can do a shorter one from Bagan up to Mandalay. The options are enormous, and what you're going to see there are some fantastic temples and pagodas, and you'll visit people and workshops and see life as it was in Asia, really as it was 30, 40 years ago. It is changing over the very few years that I've been going there. I've noticed the change. So if you want to see that, I recommend you really do need to go now. Okay. A couple of just quickly touching on a couple of the other ones that I've done recently was the Red River in Vietnam, which I don't suppose anybody will have heard of because I certainly hadn't. But this takes you from Halong Bay, which everyone will have heard of, through Hanoi, which is, again, a fantastic place. But en route, you are, again, visiting little villages, you're visiting workshops, you're finding out how the local people live. Yeah. I mean, we visited a house where they're making the Vietnamese conical hats, painstaking work, but it was just fantastic to see them doing this. Yeah. And the most recent one I just did was in India on the Brahmaputra, which is in Assam. Nobody's ever heard of the Brahmaputra I've come across. But it's the most fantastic river cruise in Assam, in northeastern India. Again, you're getting right off the beaten track. You're going to places that if you wanted to do it by road, you probably could, but my goodness, it would be uncomfortable. This is a comfortable way to do it. You're seeing people in little villages and towns that you'll never have heard of, but discovering what their lives are like, seeing their lives. And it's fantastic because they are just as enthralled to see you.
And they live
to them. Yeah. They take pictures of us because it's all such a new experience for everybody. It's just amazing.
They actually live on the river. I mean, they do their business on the river. They sell food and they work still. I mean, it's their livelihood there.
Absolutely, yes, because for a lot of them, as I say, they are so remote that, yes, there are roads, but using the roads is not really a very convenient way to travel. So actually, they still use the river to go about. Yeah.
Now, on these cruises you've mentioned, the Irrawaddy, the Mekong, how big are these boats?
They're pretty small. Well, actually, it varies a lot, to be honest. So you can probably be talking of ones that are, say, from about 30, 35 passengers, right up to larger ones, which will hold around about 120. Okay. So pays your money and takes your choice, really.
But that's not many. I mean, when you think about the average, when people think about cruising, they often think that the smallest ship is like the 900 people, the 400 or 500. But these are tiny ships that can get through and, as you said, get into the heart of the place.
That's actually something that is worth mentioning, and I should have said that at the beginning. That is one of the big differences between river cruising and ocean cruising. So in Europe, the biggest ships on the rivers, you're talking of around about 200 passengers. Right. They're the biggest ones, and you can go right down to, let's say, something like 98, even 70. Some of them have in Europe, and then, as I say, when you go over to Asia, when I did the Red River. The boat we were on, I'm not going to call it a ship because it really was more of a boat. Absolutely. Yeah. Colonial style, absolutely beautiful, lovely. The cabins open out onto this narrow promenade with deck all around. It is really, really lovely. But that's, if I remember rightly, 32 passengers. Wow. So, as I say, talking of much, much smaller.
What lines would you recommend in Asia? What recommendations?
Oh my goodness! Amma Waterways again has cruises on the Mekong. You'll find them there. Uniworld River Cruises. Okay. If you're talking about on the Irrawaddy, one to look at might be Belmond. They've got two out there actually, but the one I went on with them is Orkala. Which holds 50 passengers. That was a lovely, lovely experience. And also a company called Sanctuary Retreats. And they have the Sanctuary Ananda, which I think was about 42 passengers or something like that. My memory is not quite as good as it was. But again, fabulous experience, absolutely wonderful experience to cruise with them on the Irrawaddy. And a big name out there is Pandau. And they are a big, they have cruises on the Mekong, on the Irrawaddy. That's who I cruise with on the Red River. And you can book the Brahmaputra through them. Actually, also through Saga. It's worth getting in touch. If Brahmaputra appeals, Saga is now selling that. It's on a boat called the Mahabahu.
That's a good idea, that one, because we mentioned before in another video that Saga is actually a company designed for people over 50. It's got that focus.
Absolutely, and they package everything together for you. So it's the easy way to do it. So the package includes the flights, includes your transfers, and all of the things like that obviously you do need to get out there, and getting out to Assam isn't the easiest thing in the world. You do need to do a couple of flights to get out there. Yeah. So they've got all of that sorted out, as I say. So if you go with Saga, they got the package, they've got it all lined up. So very, very easy.
So, I mean, you've been on lots of these different river cruises. Would you say that there's a good percentage of older people that travel? I mean, not that age has to make any difference, but what would you say is the demographic?
Yes. River cruising actually still is really appealing mostly to the 60s and over.
Really? I had a feeling that was the case because when on the Viking cruise, that was definitely the case. Over 50, I would say, 50 and up.
It's a shame. Well, mostly when I'm going on, I'm finding I'm with people who are either very close to or retirement or have been retired for some time, and which I think is a great shame. I know your audience is over 60s, and that's great. It's a wonderful holiday for people who are over 60, but actually it's also a wonderful holiday for people who are in their 50s or in their 40s. It's because of all the things we've been talking about, all the places you can go, all the things that you can see, and this is the easy way to do it and the best way to do it.
You know, I'm really glad that we've had this conversation for lots and lots of levels, but I think it's really important that there's this stereotype about cruising in general. I remember when I was in my 30s and 40s, I would never think of cruising. It was like for old people, and why would you? It was boring. But now that I see I wish I started cruising on river cruising earlier. Because
I think a lot of people feel like that, actually.
It's
this idea that it's boring. I mean, it's really not boring. Okay, maybe if you just can't sit and watch things for 2 hours, but that's time you can sit and you can read a book, or you could watch a film or something like that, and then
write a book.
Sure, fantastic times of shore.
That's great.
It's amazing.
Jane, as always, you enthrall me and excite me, and I always want to just immediately hang up and go and book a cruise somewhere. You've got me on Porto, though. I think I might actually look for that in the summer if I can. But no, really great, and I appreciate people. By the way, just if you're watching and interested in learning more about Jane's work, she writes for the Daily Telegraph, and I understand if we go to the Daily Telegraph, we can find your articles that you've written on all of your magical tours. How do we do that? You just go to Daily Telegraph.
Yep. I'd love to sound intelligent about this. The best way to do it is just type in the search box, Telegraph, Jane Archer, and see what comes up.
Up they will come.
You should find a page with many of my articles, if not all of them.
Okay, because every time Jane goes on a cruise, she writes about it. So I think you'll find a lot of great information there. And we'll make some notes on the article too. Thank you, Jane, again. It's been wonderful to chat with you. Appreciate all of your wisdom and insights. Great.
Pleasure.
Thank you. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our 60andMe YouTube channel and also visit our website. We are a strong and dynamic community of women over 60. We're challenging aging stereotypes, and every day we share fascinating stories, interesting questions, and great conversation.